Hi, everybody. I'm Cecily here from Yoga Detour, and joining me today is a very special guest over that way, Johnson from Heart and Bones Yoga. And we wanted to get together today to chat just about some things related to how we approach the yoga practice, but also to share with you some information about her upcoming workshop, which is happening here in Toronto, the Sustainable Yoga Immersion in October 21st and 22nd. So we'll get to that in a moment. But first, hi, Brea.
Hello.
So I wanted to start just by giving you the opportunity to introduce yourself to our audience here, for those of you who may not have heard of you or know of you, to give us a little bit of an idea of where you are coming from in terms of your yoga practice and your history, how you came to yoga in the first place, and we'll sort of just start there.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm Brea Johnson, and yeah, I've been teaching yoga for just about 15 years now. And it's been great. And what got me into yoga was, I don't know. I think I actually was 19. I was living in Hawaii for a couple months. I met a girl who had just finished her yoga teacher training, and she just let me start going to her classes. And I remember going and being so fat, like it sucked, honestly. Like I say this in my bio, it's like the first class I ever did hurt. We did these sun salutations. Like I was not a flexible person. I didn't come into yoga from that place. So I remember doing sun salutations and being like, oh, what is this? Barely get my foot forward in a lunge, but being super fascinated. I remember asking her afterwards going, so like this was made by men in India thousands of years ago. Like, what is this? And just ever since then, it just kind of captured my interest. But as a teacher, I've always been really concerned with good movement, and that's definitely evolved over the years, and that's definitely evolved as science has evolved as well. I think in the early days of teaching, we didn't really, in my experience, I don't think we really had a lot of yoga movement education. Like I think Iyengar yoga was maybe my first taste of alignment and doing things right. I wouldn't say I agree with a lot of the Iyengar cues anymore, but back in the day, that was like, okay, cool. Like, cause it gave me as a teacher the opportunity to provide my students with more options, because right away I realized, wow, yoga's great. Some of these poses are great, but they're not going to be great for everyone. Right. So that's really fueled it's evolved over the years, but that's definitely fueled my curiosity since the beginning, is just moving and breathing and just seeing how this practice can really make such a big difference for so many people.
Right. So what types of yoga have you been exposed to, like since you first practiced your very first time where it was so difficult and seemingly inaccessible? Were you more of like an Ashtanga practice and then Iyengar, or?
Well, no, I think for me, it was always more like good old fashioned Hatha. So this would have been 1999 when I first started. So it's interesting to see the yoga world evolve over these years, and styles that didn't exist in 99 now exist, right? Or let's say Anusara came later. So for me, it was like there weren't a lot of options other than doing kind of just generalized Hatha. And then I moved to Toronto for about a year, pretty quickly after I started doing yoga. And I think, was it Yoga on Bloor? Does that still exist in Toronto? I don't even know.
I don't know.
See, I can't. Yeah. So, and again, so this is like the year 2000 now. And I volunteered at that yoga studio there. So I got to do karma yoga and try all these different styles. So I ended up being able to, that was my first exposure of a lot of different types of yoga, Ashtanga, and didn't love, because again, I was a really inflexible person. So that just really, it was too intense for me and too type A. And they had Kripalu classes at the time that I really liked with a really great teacher. I've kind of been I've done Iyengar over the years. I've studied directly with the Deskachar lineage and teachers with that in India. But so I've kind of done everything, and there's never been a style that has ever stuck with me. I like to make jokes that I'm a really bad student and a really bad follower, because it's like, I pick and choose, and I like this, and then there's times where I'm like, don't tell me how to do yoga.
Yeah.
So which I think is really, I love, and I just have over the years realized that's just who I am, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all.
Not follow blindly.
So one of the ways that I initially found my way to you and your website was through Nutritious Movement and Katie Bowman. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that influence in your life and in your practice, and then if there's other major teachers or influences that have kind of brought you to the approach that you now use to teach.
Yeah, well, so it is actually kind of funny. So here I've been a really bad yoga follower, right? So it's like I've tried all these different styles, spent time learning from amazing teachers, but I've never really, there was no one that ever was like, oh, you're that teacher. Because really my philosophy always has been, you are your own teacher ultimately, right? Be your own guru. But it's interesting that when I found Katie's work, that she would have been the first person that I really resonated with. So I love that it wasn't even in yoga, you know? And because for a lot of years when I found her, when I finally came across her work, I was in what I call my yoga existential crisis, where I was really questioning everything. And as a teacher, you know, like with that intention, like teaching the students in front of me and the bodies in front of me and going, man, like there's some stuff that's not good, but it wasn't adequate for me to say, don't do this because I feel like it's not right. You know, my senses tell me no, like I needed some backup and I needed some education around that. So when I finally found Katie's work and I read through her blog, it was just like, oh my God, she's speaking my language. She gave validation to the things that I intuitively felt were maybe not great. Yeah. And then the ways to move. And it was so easily applicable to yoga because it's applicable to, it's biomechanics. To me, I look at that work as setting the foundation for just human movement. So that foundation, once you kind of understand how humans move, the basic ways, we can reapply it to yoga. You can reapply it to strength training, Pilates, anything that you do that you love. And so that was great. So I just find it really funny that it took me going outside of the yoga world to get re-inspired in yoga again.
Yeah. Those of you, anyone out there who's watching, who's from the Yoga Detour training or does my classes is going to feel like they're talking to me when they hear you say that, because it's so similar to my experience with going outside the yoga community, finding these sources and inspirations from people who really have nothing to do with yoga, and then making that realization that, yeah, let's start with this foundational type of learning where we understand the body, understand how the body is designed to move, and then you take your pick. So in our detour training, it's like, yeah, we choose to take that information and layer it into the yoga practice. But often what ends up happening is people then see the opening, the availability for them to then take that information and apply it to whatever they want, whether they're running or rock climbers or whatever it might be. So it becomes so much more than just yoga training.
Yes, exactly. And I really feel that this is the wave of the future, you know, and I think some people might not think, I know there's people out there who may be more traditionalists in that sense, who really feel like, but yoga is this, and yoga is this unchanged tradition for thousands of years. And it's like, but no, not at all, actually, you know, and I think teachers like us, and I'm seeing this more and more out in the world, where we're being, I think in a lot of ways, bold enough just to do something different and yet still call it yoga. Right. Because it really, you know, in my opinion, it is still yoga. And the fact that we can it's like taking this more sustainable approach, taking this into the biomechanics and this information from outside sources, reapplying, like to me, that's just the blueprint of human movement. And as you said, putting that so then it translates into everything else that we do. So we just feel better.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of feeling better, what would you say are some of the biggest game changers that first, I guess, you discovered in your own body, but then now you've been sharing with students of yours and seeing them have those aha moments?
I think in some ways it's actually maybe the biggest way is the deconstructed movements. The fact that, you know, when we can take apart, this is how I try to explain it to teachers when I'm training them or in classes or more workshop-y things. It's just you know, yoga is great, and we've all been doing yoga for a long time, and it's been wonderful. And maybe there's been a little bit of injuries, but maybe I might have had injuries playing soccer or doing something like that, right? That can happen in anything. But like some of these really big movements that we do in yoga, that's like learning to dance or learning to like a big complicated dance step without actually breaking it apart and knowing the steps. And what I think the big game changer is when we can deconstruct these big movements into more of their component parts, people are shocked at how hard it is, because we're taking away the potential for compensations. And so let me just use an example. Let's say something like a full wheel. Like that's just a really big movement that takes a lot of shoulder flexibility, hip flexibility, strength, and whatnot. But let's say you're a really mobile person. You can kind of sneak into that full wheel and from a rib thrust, or from your really hypermobile arms, let's say. But if we bring it let's actually just look at the movement in the shoulder joint and look at different ways and put some boundaries on those movements. Yeah, I think the big aha moment goes, oh, I'm not as mobile as I thought I was, because we're using our bodies differently and instead of those habitual patterns.
Right.
And I love it because then, and I often say this in classes too, is that it's like the great equalizer. There's some deconstructed movements that we do where even like the tightest person or the most flexible person, everybody's just barely moving, right? Because it's such a deconstructed, specific way of moving your body that it's like everybody's struggling. And that's what's so great about it. Struggling in a good way.
Struggling in a good way. Yeah. They're on the right track. They're going to get there. Anything else that sort of stands out to you as being things that you maybe bring into your classes that people wouldn't ordinarily see in other yoga classes?
Yeah. So again, like it's all like, I think it's really a lot of that deconstructed movements that play for me. I really come at it from a playful education sort of way, because not everybody cares about the details of the shoulder movements. Like people just want to feel good, but giving them in a more kind of snippet, playful soundbite sort of way. Like if we're doing, like sometimes we'll take time in the class as a warm up and we're just literally moving the scapula and circling one shoulder blade around. And it like, is that exciting? Maybe. I think it's exciting, but some people excuse me, who come to classes might not think that. So that's when I try to bring that playful education in and be like, guess what? You have 17 muscles attached to these shoulder blades. So while this small little seeming deconstructed movement of shoulder blade circles doesn't seem like much, to those 17 muscles, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And people get, like in reframing it like that, and people really get that and appreciate that.
I find that a lot in my classes as well, where people are so accustomed to seeing these, big, fancy, sexy poses on Instagram. And then they come into class and it's like, okay, we're going to do a shoulder circle. And that doesn't seem as sexy or anywhere near as exciting. But yeah, getting people to that place where they can appreciate that if they do want to take on bigger movements, that in order to get there as efficiently as possible, and hopefully in a way that will avoid injury, then we can break it down into these components so that then we're working with a lot more functionality.
Yeah. Well, and even just having value in those small movements. So maybe you're using those small movements as a pathway towards the big ones. And even if you never get into a big movement, you've already done such good work.
Just made them feel so much better. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like when I started to really consciously shift my classes into this direction, like people always like to look at my classes like, yay, whoa, that was good. Yoga was good. But then but then I started to get this, there was this whole, when someone got it, they got it. I just saw this shift in people's reactions going, oh my God, I feel so much better. Or it's like, or the way I describe it, it's like, we've just put in the missing pieces in the yoga practice. Some of the things that we never really focused on, and so another big game changer is more posterior leg strength. I feel like most of my classes, we're working on our butts.
Yeah.
It's just, that backside needs to wake up. So all of a sudden we're using different muscles that in familiar poses that we haven't always worked on. And people they just feel the difference. The proof is in the pudding. It's not like I've changed as a person necessarily, right? So it's not like, Brea, your classes are so great. It's like, wow, I'm learning about my body. I tangibly feel that difference. Holy crap, I've never felt downward dog like that, or X pose. So yeah, I think that's been a big.
I would say for sure, yeah, that posterior chain strength, and also even like the posterior side of the shoulders.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All of it. It's like all those little nooks and crannies that
Mhm.
get bypassed when we're doing just really big, gigantic movements, which in
Yeah.
and of themselves aren't bad, but it's that frequency. And if that's how we've always practiced, we've lost the opportunity to move the little parts, create more stability, find that difference between like why this emphasis just on flexibility? What about mobility, getting that
Right.
balance between the strength and flexibility?
Yes. Yes. Totally.
Mhm.
So, how have you then started to apply this information to teacher training when you're working with people who maybe already have a concept of how they understand yoga and teaching yoga, and then sharing with them this kind of expanded viewpoint around incorporating information that's not from the yoga community, it's from other places?
Oh my God, it has been a journey, I have to tell you, to be perfectly honest. I think because in some way, like on one hand, it's super easy to teach when I have people who already are in the paradigm, who are ready to listen to something different out of the tradition. Super great, super awesome. It's when I've been in situations where people are still in that traditional yoga paradigm, and I want to clarify, like when I say traditional yoga, it doesn't mean that that's a bad thing, good or bad, or it's just traditional meaning the way that we've always done things.
Yes.
And we're in this amazing place, I feel, in the yoga world where things are evolving and more people are getting on board to continue to make yoga into that living tradition. But if you've been, and if you didn't even know that there was another possibility, I've found on one hand very challenging to try to teach some teachers. And I'm speaking more maybe from on a 300-hour level where somebody is already teaching, somebody's already in that paradigm. And then I'm telling them, actually, what if you didn't fold all the way forward to touch your toes? What if you reined it in and used your posterior chain muscles instead? And it's just like, what? I don't like that. That's hard. I'm not as good at, like, I feel like there's so many layers that you have to unpack, because I think some people feel like, well, I'm like, whether they're conscious of that or not, like, I'm not a good yogi anymore if I can't touch my toes. If I rein in my big movements.
Yeah.
So, it's tricky, but going through the challenging scenarios a few times in different teacher trainings where I've realized, okay, cool, as much as I care about this, maybe not everybody does, what's a way to communicate this effectively so that we still see that it's still yoga if we do something slightly different. It's still yoga if we update or expand a pose. So what I came to was, I came up with the 4 pillars of a sustainable yoga practice is what I called. And these 4 pillars are my way of, because I also don't want to get into dogma. I don't want this new expanded approach to yoga to be this, like, this is the only way to do it. So then we're just back at square one again. So my philosophy is like, just teach a yogi to fish by learning to use a saying, so learn about your body. And then and take this information and then apply it in a way that's authentic to you and your students. So with the 4 pillars in a sustainable yoga practice, which you will learn if you come to the workshop. So one of them is variety and diversity of movement. And I've purposely made these pillars kind of broad as well. So they're a lens in which you can evaluate your poses and evaluate your movements. So if one of the pillars is variety and diversity of movement, think about, if I've been practicing yoga for 15 years and doing downward dog the exact same way for 15 years, there's going to be a point where that was good, the way that I practice down dog. And then there's going to be a point where, maybe there's some repetition, and that's where some of that wear and tear can go on. So adding a different way of doing down dog, even something as simple as putting my hands a little bit wider than I normally do, maybe more in front, right? Like, it doesn't have to be this weird, crazy new hybrid pose. It's just like create variety and diversity. Another one is frequency. So that kind of goes back to that same down dog example of, if I'm doing downward dog every day for 15 years the same way, there's not enough variety and diversity, and there's a lot of frequency in that. So maybe I actually don't do down dog every day. Maybe I do something else.
Yeah.
And then one of the other pillars, know your boundaries. So that's a big one, is kind of going back to what we're talking about with those deconstructed movements, is understanding, like, how do I move, and do I blow past my own movement physical boundaries? And that's fine if you do sometimes, but at least you even know where those nebulous, abstracted boundaries are. And then, of course, my favorite one, restore and support. So as much as movement is awesome and wonderful, so shavasana,
Yeah.
so is slowing down and relaxing.
Mm-hmm.
So these pillars are just, again, the ways that you can just view the world. And so when I'm teaching teachers, then it's not this confrontational, this is the new way that you should do yoga or else you're going to get injured and blah, blah, blah. It's like, hey, you just got to ask yourself, when I'm sequencing a class, am I giving my students enough variety? Even when you look at the students that you have where, most people are coming in, let's just say from a desk job where they're working for 8 hours, 6 hours, hunched over, tight hips. So if we're going to do a lot of this rounding movements, is that really something that we need to do as a teacher? So you can take that and go, okay, I'm going to give them some variety and diversity for their shoulders, hence those shoulder blade circles again.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, cool. So in terms of the actual weekend, and I should say that just while we're here, those of you who are watching, if you have questions that you want to ask us, please put them into the comments so that we can try and answer while we're live. Yeah. But in the meantime, getting into the details about the workshop they'll be teaching here in October, who is this workshop for and what can they expect from it?
Well, it's for both teachers and regular yogis, so you don't have to be an advanced practitioner. What I love about this approach, and I said earlier, was that it's kind of the great equalizer, is that because we're looking at movement through a really foundational lens. What we're going to be looking at is, so it's because it's 2 days, we'll do 1 day as hips and psoas. We'll look at that, and then we'll do shoulders and neck as a second day. And using those two body parts as a way for you to walk away and understand more of, okay, well, how do my shoulders move? Mm-hmm. We don't even get that crazy deep into anatomy because my approach is more anatomy through movement, understanding not just like your shoulder blades called the scapula, but let's just talk about how it moves and how, okay, one might move better than the other. And then now how does that shoulder blade move in down dog? How does that shoulder blade move in a handstand? And then and same with the hip joint. So what's hip extension? How do we get more mobility into the hips? What do your hips need for health and sustainability? And so it's like taking apart breaking it down to the component parts. Start with the foundation of movement, just understanding human movement, and then building on that, looking at different yoga poses. And then so I've kind of jokingly coined the term sustainabilize. Mm-hmm. So we're going to sustainabilize some of our most common yoga poses and just ways to, update it. So again, if you've been doing that yoga or that downward dog for so many years, what are some little key tips that you can update it so that there is more support for the joint, so that you're not just hanging out into your flexibility, or if you're so tight that you're never actually seeing changes, so getting more movement throughout every joint and every part of you.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
With a lot of laughter and fun as well.
Yeah. So it's really, anybody could come to the workshop, anyone who's interested in kind of your approach to yoga. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And would there be anything that you would encourage them to do to prepare for that? Or if there are other influences that you'd like to expose them to in advance of that workshop, or think they can just kind of dive right in with you?
I think what's helpful, that's a good question, because in some ways, the workshop always flows smoother if we're already, again, back to that sense of a paradigm, if we're already aware that things need to evolve, like how we can keep yoga as that living tradition where we're making this practice and looking at this practice and trying to figure out ways to keep it more relevant to our modern lives, to the bodies that we bring into our yoga practice. If you're a yoga teacher, again, giving you more tools to really make it supportive for your students. So, I've got a lot, if you go to Heart and Bones Yoga on Facebook here, I've got a lot of videos. So you could, in some ways, look at some of the different ways that I've talked about, or some little practice videos. So you can see this approach in action, feel it in your body for a little while. So it's not even having to be all that intellectual, just trying out these different ways of moving and adapting your yoga practice, and then coming in from there. But at the same time, if you don't do any of that and you just show up, it's all good, because we always start with that foundation. We create a context and then we build on that, so it's a little bit more clear for everyone.
Awesome. Okay, well, this is all sounding really good. I want to end with a question that I did not tell you I was going to be asking you. This is just that I like to ask everybody who I talk to, online or otherwise, who I know is a fellow body nerd like I am, what's one of the most recent things that you read or listened to, like a podcast, that you had a moment of like, oh, that's a really good way of saying that, or oh, that was really cool. I didn't quite think of that way before.
The first thing that comes to, there's lots, there's always, God, I swear daily, I'm like, oh my God, I love this. But I think one of the things that really continue, and I teach, and now I integrate it into all my teaching, is mirror neurons. Mirror neurons are so freaking cool. So real quick, so mirror neurons are, so here we are. So here's Cecily and I talking right now and through a screen. And so if I'm raising my hand, and everybody watching this, so if I'm raising my hand, you guys all can see me raise my hand like that. So if we were looking at each other's brains in some sort of brain watching thing, what's
imagery situation?
You can tell I'm a scientist here. That brain watching thing that they do, they would see that even though Cecily or you didn't move your hand, it would look like your brain responds in the way that as if it actually did move it.
Right.
So what they think with mirror neurons is that's where the root of empathy comes from. Think about this: if you see somebody trip and fall, right? It's like, many of us, if not, I assume most of us, get that visceral reaction. So again, that's that mirror neuron. And to me, when I read about that and I found out about that, not only did I find that so amazing, but because I just, I have such a deep belief that we're all connected, right? Like we're all in this together as humans. And for science now to back that up and go, yeah, literally you are connected. I don't even have to do the movement and my brain acts as if I did that same movement. Like, to me, there's just so many layers of implications of amazingness on that just gets my heart just so full. And especially as a movement teacher, or as a mover, as a person that's just mindfully and consciously moved for so many years, it's just knowing that I'm mirror neuroning, if that's a term, right? So if I'm as a teacher up in front of the room, then that's also another invitation to be more clear and to be more simple and just trust that we don't have to overtalk, let's say, or that we don't have to we're already connecting on this deep level. So that's, I think, the one that continues to stay really amazing to me. And, and honestly, other things too, like I'm actually a big sci-fi and fantasy nerd. Reading. Oh my God. And so recently I've been reading really good sci-fi books, which just opens my brain to space and the future of humanity. So God only knows where it all connects back into the movement. It really does. It's like that macro to the micro. So yeah. Right. And what can I turn the questions on you, my friend?
Oh yeah, sure. While you were just talking about mirror neurons, I was listening to something yesterday. I can't think of what it was, but it was along the same lines, and they were saying how when we see a chair, like we can see a chair on the other side of the room, and there's something in our brain that starts telling us to sit in that chair.
Oh, weird.
Before we even feel like we need to sit down, the brain will say, like, chair, sit. Which I found really crazy.
I know. That's kind of a scary program. That makes me wonder, like, why? Like, did they explain why that was? Is that
they didn't go into detail around that specific example so much. It was just more so like we have to be aware that there's stuff happening in our brains all the time that we're not conscious of at all.
Yeah.
And then I've also been I love podcasts in general. And this morning I was listening to one of the Rich Roll podcast episodes, and it was on high performance. And at first when I turned it on, I was like, oh, this is going to be all about athletes and people who do crazy things like Ironman triathlons, which I have so much respect for, but it's like, well, that's not me. So then I put it on, and it was actually just about high performance in terms of kind of like just hustling hard. And I think that a lot of time I'm hustling hard, and it talked about the importance of rest. And I love that you included that in your 4 pillars, because they were describing how it's not difficult to push hard. It's not difficult to keep going and to go fast and to just propel yourself through life without any kind of check-in or mindfulness around it. And what's actually difficult is to stop and to give yourself those boundaries in your day and in your week and in your year, so that it's not just about the work, and it can be about other things as well. And I noticed that in, like, when I work with clients, for example, how many of them want to just be moving the entire session that we're doing together. And then when I insist on putting in breaks of anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute and a half, maybe a bit more, some of them will get so antsy around not doing. And so I think that teaching people how to embrace that as an ingredient towards whatever you want to call it, a success or high performance or just feeling better, and achieving the goals that we want to achieve, whatever they might be, that there is that component of nothingness.
Totally. On so many levels like that. I know. And it's easier said than done. I think that's a really interesting point that they bring up, that it's easy to push, and that it's easy, because in some ways you kind of think that it's not easy to push, or that it's not easy to keep going. But I think in contrast to slowing down, it's way easier just to keep that up. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I know. And even I just love the simplicity. That's why I love Shavasana, and I'm such a proponent of it, because it's like, it's not just the quiet stillness, mindfulness aspect that Shavasana can bring, but there's that. So back to that nervous system, like it's like your nervous system, maybe, and that's something that came up when you said about the programming of the chair. This is all speculation, because I'm only hearing this third hand now from you. But my mind immediately went, because when you lie down, so I'm just going to use Shavasana as that example. When you lie down, your nervous system doesn't have to work to hold you up anymore. So we're all sitting up to some degree, and the nervous system, your proprioception this is what it's supposed to do, right? It's like, it's keeping us upright. It's always like that super fast communication to just keep you up. But the moment that you can actually let the floor hold you up, or a bed or a chair hold you up, then your nervous system can have that deeper layer of relaxation. So that's what came to me when you're saying that about the chair thing, is like, oh, I wonder if we see chair, and on that really deep, subtle level, the nervous system is like, sit me the F down. Yeah. I need some rest. Yeah. And then that cultural programming of, well, then I'm lazy if I have to sit or lie down, which, oh God, there's so many layers. We should do a whole nother combo about Shavasana and slowing down.
Oh yeah, it's a big topic, and it's something I think a lot of people do have a hard time with. Some people don't. They're just like, oh yeah, lie me down and I could be asleep in a second. But I think for a lot of us, we forget the importance of just of doing very little or nothing, and letting ourselves experience that in a way that's not resistant or feeling guilty around it. Oh my God, totally. Yeah. Well, this has been a great chat. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I would just then say, everybody has homework, go do Shavasana right now. At the end of this, let's all lie down.
Let's go have a siesta.
Yes. And you're still a person, and you're still accomplishing stuff. No, I would add that we are doing the early bird special till we've extended it to June 12th for the workshop. Right.
Yes.
So Monday, I believe.
This coming Monday, yeah. Those of you who are in Toronto or planning on coming to Toronto for this workshop, some people have already signed up, just so you know, even though the workshop is still several months away. We do have spots filling up now because of this great early bird promotion. So if you log on to yogadetour.com and go into our continuing education programs, which is under teacher training, then we can you can purchase the course right through the website, and it will be for that early bird price up until this coming Monday. So I'm just going to verify that link here really quickly. Here it comes. Yeah, if you the full URL, if you want to just type it in, is yogadetour.com/CEP/sustainable yoga. And we'll put that in the comments as well for any of you who are watching this after the fact. If you're watching the recording, feel free to leave any comments or questions down there for us. We will see them and we will respond to them. But for now, I think we're going to sign off and enjoy the rest of our day.
Wonderful. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And thanks for the chat, Cecily.
Yeah, thank you, Brea. It's great to talk to you.
Thanks.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Hi.